Yes, you'll take it both as a recruit, and then there's more scenario-based training you'll do once you've graduated and you're an officer attending in-service training.
Okay. Now, in terms of the number of weeks, how many weeks does somebody go to the academy?
It's between maybe 23 to about 26 weeks, again, depending on how holidays fall. So it is almost a 6-month process.
Okay. Well, what are some of the courses that are covered?
There's a ton of courses that are covered, and it's kind of broken down into blocks. So some of your main blocks of instruction that you'll receive are criminal law, which is about a week-long, criminal procedures, another week-long course. They learn stress management, interpersonal communication type skills, de-escalation training. They go through their more higher liability area training, which is the defensive tactics and handcuffing course. And they do both a basic and advanced week of that training. They'll do firearms block of instruction, that's both basic and advanced. And then the other high liability area is our driving, our evoc training. They'll do basic and another advanced course with that. Yeah, and there's a whole laundry list of classes that they take, fair and impartial policing, community policing. It's a long list.
Long list, okay. Can you describe what is in-service training?
So in-service training happens once you go from recruit status to officer status. So everybody that finishes the academy has to come back once a year, and we complete 16 hours of in-service training that covers topics ranging from now deadly force and de-escalation. There's a mandated community policing course that has to be done, and then we will do follow-on topics that just need to be covered periodically. So we'll do defensive tactics refreshers, driving refreshers, and first aid, first responder type treatment. Anything that through the training committee, a group of officers decide that we need to revisit for department-wide training.
Okay. And then what is FTO training?
So FTO, when you complete the academy, the next step in the hiring process essentially is going to the road where you're accompanied by a training officer for about 12 weeks. You're riding with that officer and you go through 3 different phases. In that initial phase, you're kind of sitting in the passenger seat, learning the ropes. You're watching what your training officer is doing, how they're handling calls. There's a skills mastery checklist that runs the entire length of your FTO process. So certain types of calls that you need to be exposed to, how to show up to court on time, where to go. It teaches you everything that once you're an officer on the road, it's what you're expected to be able to do in a solo capacity.
Now, as an FTO, once you complete FTO training, are you then able to help, I guess, guide newly hired officers? Is that a fair way of saying it?
Now, so FTO training as the FTO course is different than the FTO process. So once you've been on the road for a few years and you are recommended by your supervisor, you can attend the FTO course. It's a 40-hour block of instruction that teaches you how to train the new officers, what your expectations are, areas of liability that you need to go over with them, how to fill out daily observation reports. It's how to do the job of the person that's teaching these new officers for 12 weeks. That's what's covered.
Okay. Now, I think I already asked you, you were at the academy for roughly how long?
From December of 2015 to December of 2018.
And what specifically did you teach at the academy?
So I was specifically assigned to the firearms training unit.
Okay. And did that include the use of force and deadly force?
Yes, so one of my job responsibilities as a firearms instructor was to teach every year during the first quarter qualifications. I had to teach a block of instruction that dealt with using deadly force, and it was a use of force refresher. And then I would also teach that to recruits in their basic firearms week of instruction.
Okay. Roughly how many times, based on your memory, have you taught use of force?
I don't have a specific number. I can't pinpoint, but it's been a lot of times. I could say easily 50, but I don't have a specific number for you.
Okay. Now, do you think approximately 50 times?
At least, yes.
Okay. Now, when did you become a post-certified instructor?
So I became a post instructor in February of 2016.
Okay. And what is a post-certified instructor?
So that's another course you got to take. It's 80 hours worth of credit where you learn how to teach other police officers. It's basically becoming certified to be an instructor, assuming the liability for the content that you were delivering to your students. And then that whole course culminates with you teaching a block of instruction that you create from scratch.
Okay. Now, have you taught outside the academy?
Not outside of the academy as a post instructor. I have done community type courses when I was an accident investigator. I would teach like a teen safe driving class at Hebron Christian Academy for Kids in Driver's Ed, but I have not given any law enforcement training per se outside the academy.
Now, department-wide, how often have you taught use of force?
At least that number I gave earlier, at least 50 times. Again, I would teach it to certified officers coming back for their annual requalification because it's mandated by the state of Georgia.
Okay.
They get that training, and then I would teach it to the recruits as part of their basic firearms program. We give them 8 hours of classroom instruction, and we do cover using force and deadly force during that block.
Okay. And have you also taught de-escalation?
I have.
And when did you start teaching that?
De-escalation training started, I want to say it was third quarter of 2017. It became mandated by the state that we provide that training to our officers. And it was just an hour of instruction that we would do prior to their qualification course.
Okay. Have you also presented low light tactics?
Yes.
And what is that?
So low light tactics, it involves the use of ambient lighting or alternate lighting, like having a weapon light or a flashlight, because a number of police engagements that involve deadly force occur in low light conditions. We teach our recruits and we refresh with our officers how to use their lights to their advantage and to be tactically sound with them.
Okay. And have you also presented in the high-risk vehicle stops?
Yes.
And what is a high-risk vehicle stop?
So high-risk vehicle stop, that's one of the blocks of instructions I didn't mention earlier with the academy training. Recruits learn how to do traffic stops, and you have two categories, low risk and high risk. High-risk vehicle stops are intel-driven, where you know that I'm stopping a vehicle that might have armed robbery suspects because it matches the description provided on the radio, or it's a stolen vehicle, where there's somebody that's likely armed who's going to present some violence potentially towards me. So it's a different tactic that we teach to handle that situation safely.
Okay. Now, have you also, in regards to the training materials that are provided at the academy, have you helped participate in the compilation side? Flowing from my tongue very easily, but have you helped participate in the, the making of those materials?
Yes.
Okay.
To elaborate, just one of my responsibilities was to maintain lesson plans. So with high-risk vehicle stops, I wrote part of that lesson plan, same with de-escalation.
Okay.
And I would update the deadly force lesson plan.
Okay, you'd update deadly force?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's just speak a little closer into the microphone or pull them towards you.
Sure
Okay.
thing.
Okay. So everybody can hear you. Okay. Now, are you also familiar with the GDM?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is the GDM?
That's our general directives manual. That's got our list of policies that we're expected to follow.
Okay. Fair to say GDM is everything you're required to do as a police officer?
Yes.
Okay. Now, does the GDM policy regarding use of force, is that section 503.00?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Now, in your training on use of force and deadly force, is the policy part of your instruction?
Yes. Several slides include the GDM sections related to using force.
Okay. can't have one without the other, is that a fair say?
Correct.
Okay. Is that policy covered during the use of force training that is provided by the academy?
Yes.
And then is that policy part of the instruction that you actually provide?
It is.
Okay. Now, as an officer with Gwinnett County Police Department, are you familiar with all the directives in the GDM?
I'm familiar with all of them. I've had to sign for all of them.
Okay. What do you mean you had to sign for all of them?
So the current system that we use to access the GDM, it's on a website called Power DMS. It's a online database, and we provide our electronic signature for each of the sections in our policy. And then as occasional updates come out, we're required to log back in, read the policy, and then sign for that policy.
Okay.
Prior to that, we would have to hand sign a form that said we're familiar with the new policy updates.
Okay. And you've had to do that continually?
Yes.
Okay. Your Honor, at this time, the state would move to tender Sergeant Cordino as an expert in use of force, specifically as the Gwinnett County policy and the Gwinnett County Police Department use of force and the related policies of Gwinnett County.
He will be accepted as an expert. The jury will receive his testimony as an expert on the field of stated conditions.
Now, let me ask you first, officers take oaths, is that fair to say?
Yes.
Are the oaths required by law?
Yes.
Unfortunately, again, I would object. They have to prove what the law is. They have to prove it's not state statute. They have to prove what the law is. What this officer says or doesn't say is not constitutional.
Your Honor, again, as we've discussed, I believe he's competent to talk about an officer having to take an oath for Gwinnett County.
But not, if they take it up, he can testify, we have to take it up. Whether or not it's required by law or anything else, I don't think he can testify.
Further explain that, I think he can testify that you're required to take an oath prescribed by law.
Overruled. He can answer.
Are you required to take an oath to be a Gwinnett County police officer that is prescribed by law?
Yes.
Can you be a Gwinnett County police officer if you don't take those oaths?
No.
Now we go from singular to plural oaths.
Pardon?
Now, we've gone from singular oaths to plural oaths, Judge, so I would again object.
Your Honor, again, I'm gonna show him the oaths, and he can testify to that, I believe.
You might want to inquire how he knows that.
Okay. How do you know that, officer?
I'm sorry.
How do you know that you're required to take an oath required by law?
Because, well, one, as a recruit in the academy prior to graduation, the judge comes in and presents the oath to you, and you have to take it. So
Okay.
my understanding at that point, it's required.
Okay.
Because the judge shows up and asks you to take an oath, Judge, that could be a ceremonial oath. Where is the law that says what they have to do?
Your Honor, the officer's not being, I think he can testify that he's required to take an oath prescribed by law. He can't testify. The law is the determination for the court. He can testify that he's required to take an oath prescribed by law. My other question to him, can you be a Gwinnett County police officer without taking the Gwinnett County Department oath?
No.
Okay.
Objection overruled.
Your Honor, the state had previously provided notice that it was going to exhibit number 42.
Number 41.
42 is a business record certificate from the Gwinnett County Police Department stating that the oaths are a business record.
Okay.
Can I approach Ron?
Yes, admit.
And
Judge, I would object.
You objecting to the admission of it?
Yes.
I'm sorry.
No, not as to the business records. No, that it is part of the business record. I'm not objecting to that. I'm objecting to this officer referring to an oath that's not his oath without further basis. As far as the business record exception, she and I discussed that, I don't have a problem with that. But as to the oaths and what the oaths say and what they're related to, I don't believe he can testify to that, because I don't believe he's competent to testify, number one, and that's not the proper proof that it's required by law.
Your Honor, the state extended a business record certificate seeking to admit this as a business record, filed a notice. If the proper business record, it comes in, we don't need the witness. He can testify, he's familiar with these oaths, he knows what they look like. So the state would seek to admit, what I'm entering is the departmental oath, the official oath, and the loyalty oath.
You're tendering
Yes.
it? You're not objecting to the document itself?
No, I'm not objecting to the documents. We agreed that she could use the business certificate. We agreed that she wouldn't have to call a witness for that purpose. I don't have no problem with that part. I'm objecting to this witness testifying to anything to do about required by law, Judge.
I understand. So at 42, states 42 will be admitted without objection.
And permission to approach, Your Honor.
You may.
I'm gonna show you, Sergeant Cordino, state's exhibit number 41, which consists of 3 pages. Now, let me ask you a question. You took your oath, correct?
Correct.
You took a department oath?
Yes, yes,
Yes.
sorry.
You're fine. A loyalty oath
Correct.
and an official oath.
Yes.
Okay. Now, looking at state's exhibit 41, first page, is that a departmental oath?
This is,
Okay. Who is that departmental oath for?
this is for Robert McDonald.
Okay. Is this departmental oath similar to the one that you yourself took?
Yes,
Go to page 2. And before I move on, we see that it's signed and dated, correct?
that's correct.
Okay. Going to the loyalty oath, same kind of question. You took your own separate loyalty oath, is that right?
That is,
Okay. And then the official oath, which is the last page, you also took your own official oath, is that correct?
yes,
Now, going back, are the loyalty oaths in these documents, are they for Robert McDonald?
yes,
I'm not sure 41 as having been previously taken.
Okay, I think I did wrong. These are oaths, stay with me here in a minute. That was the oath. We have to go.
41?
That's the same thing we're talking about, Judge. This is my objection,
I have 42.
which is the business record.
That's the business record certificate.
Okay.
And that goes with 41.
All right.
Sorry about that, I got my numbers.
And my objection still, Judge, goes to as to the departmental, what's known as the departmental oath in this case, as to any testimony related to that, as to whether or not it's required by law.
Now,
So noted.
are these oaths, are they all done about the same time?
yes,
Okay. When are the oaths administered?
they are administered. In my case, it was 2 days before our graduation ceremony and then administered again during the ceremony.
Okay.
But we did it in the classroom at the academy.
Okay. Now, to your knowledge, are the oaths later filed?
Yes,
Okay. Now, let's talk about post. Threw that out there. What is post? What does that stand for?
the Peace Officer Standards and Training Council.
Okay, and what is their part to play in being a law enforcement officer in the state of Georgia?
That's the body that oversees everybody's certification in the state of Georgia that's able to be a peace officer. All of our records, we have to be in good standing with post. They have the ability to revoke our certification to be a law enforcement officer in the state. So they're just the body that oversees all of law enforcement in Georgia.
Okay. Now, in regards to when you take a training class, is that information related to post?
Yes,
Okay. And that's so you get your credit hours, fair to say?
that's correct.
Your Honor, the state had also provided to Mr. Britt previously another business record certificate seeking, and a notice seeking to admit the post-training records.
That's correct. We have no objection with that.
Okay,
If I could approach with State's Exhibit number 43 and 44, actually, I think the certificate speaks for itself.
you may.
Approach with State's Exhibit number 44. Looking at this, what does this appear to be?
So this, when you're on the post website and you're checking through your officer records, this is what the fact sheet would bring up. It brings up every class that you have received post credit for, and it gives you a cumulative number of hours that you've received training for, broken down by year, and then you get one total number of hours of training at the end.
Okay. And every officer has one of these, is that fair to say?
That's correct. Mhm.
Your Honor, I admitted 44, did I not? I admitted 44.
No objection, it's admitted.
Now, I'm gonna show you, you're gonna have a small screen and then a large screen up there. Very small screen. Now, and I didn't ask a very, this appears to be the post record for Robert McDonald.
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to go to the bottom, and this would be page 2 of this exhibit. Looking at the academy training that McDonald had, is that noted on this record?
It is.
Okay, where is that noted?
Excuse me. So, towards the middle of that section of training courses, you'll see the basic law enforcement training course. And then right below it, you see the extended basic course. But all of those classes you see there are taught in the academy.
Okay. Now, above it, we see, well, let me ask you this question. Where is use of force noted? Where is that taught?
Or for this particular block, use of force is taught when you see the basic law enforcement training course, it's taught during the basic firearms block of instruction, which is that particular day, it's an 8-hour block of instruction, but it's within the 400 hours of training you'll see in that basic law enforcement training.
Okay. And then, so that looks like that was on or about March 12th, 2014, is that right?
I can't say that that's the day he received it, but yes, that's that
Okay.
line that I'm referring to.
Okay. And then, looks like, again, on August 26, 2014, that's when Post noted he had claimed departmental in-service training, is that right?
That's right.
Okay. Now, is use of force, is that taught in in-service training or dependent?
So it does depend on what the topics of in-service training are for that year. There are occasions where you do go over use of force, and it's typically taught through scenarios where officers are given a number of different scenarios they have to act in accordance with our policies and state law.
Okay. Now, I want to ask you, looking at this post record, and let me know if I need to go up, but you see another block where use of force training would have been provided. If I need to move it up or down, just let me know.
All right, so the very bottom of 2015, where I think that says January 28th, you'll see firearms requalification and use of deadly force. It's a 2-hour block. That is what we give every officer once they are in that solo capacity, coming back every year for their standard qualification. That's taught in first quarter. They come in, they get an hour of classroom instruction on the use of deadly force, and then they go out to the range and then they qualify.
Now, we see, again, we see departmental in-service training, looks like on or about September 16th, 2015, is that right?
That's right.
And then below that, we had some firearms requalification.
That's correct.
And then I'm gonna go to the top of this page. If I can do it, let me. Looking at, February 3rd of 2016, what did post log in as a class for that date?
So again, you'll see the firearms requalification and deadly force block.
Okay. And then a little bit above that, May 24th, 2016, that's again another firearms requalification.
Correct.
Page 1 of State's Exhibit 44. September 7th of 2016, what is noted?
September 7th has a firearms requalification and then fair and impartial policing.
What is fair and impartial policing?
That was added to in-service training for that year. It's just a course that is designed to show officers that everybody could have the potential for bias and how that manifests and how to avoid letting those biases guide you as you perform your duties to make sure that you're taking action for the right reasons. It also covers police legitimacy and how to get the community to buy into the department's goals and objectives, getting the community to work with law enforcement and what actions we could do to facilitate that and what actions we sometimes do that can drive the community away. All that's covered.
Okay. Now, looking at, and I'm going to go to February 21st of 2017, you see again another block of firearms requalification use of deadly force.
That's correct.
Okay, so again, use of force was taught during that time period.
Yes.
Post. Now, before I go on, let me ask you. I think I asked you, but I guess I did not. January 28th, 2015 is another block of use of force.
That is.
Okay. And then looking at this, I'm going to go to May 26th of 2016. Looks like there was taser training.
Yes.
Okay. Have you been tasered before in your training?
Yes, I have.
Is that what officers, and that's not going to sound the way I intended. You guys sit around tasering each other?
It's an option to take an exposure during that training.
Okay. Did you take the option?
I didn't have the option at the time not to. But yes, I did get exposed to it.
Okay. So, what does tasering feel like? What does it do to your body?
It hurts. The taser cycle lasts about 5 seconds, where you're experiencing, the term is neuromuscular incapacitation, that the two probes that get fired into your body, there's an electrical current that passes between them, and that causes your muscles to lock up. And depending on where the strike happens, depends on how many muscle groups can get locked up.
Okay. Now, and we touched on it a moment before, you're also familiar with the GDM, let's just call it that, I guess, for purposes of
Okay.
making it easier. Specifically, and you teach on this, section 503.00, is that right?
That's correct.
again, the state had provided a notice via the business record statute certification to supply the GDM through a business record and supply that certificate to Mr. Brett previously. I'm going to mark the certificate as State's Exhibit 46.
What's the number?
46, sir.
46.
Sergeant Quarantine, I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 45. And ask you to look at it, tell me what that is.
All right, so this is GDM section 503. This deals with use of force. It's our departmental policy.
Okay. Your Honor, State would move to admit State's Exhibit number 45.
No objections to 45 or 46.
Oh, and I think 46 is the one I need to
That'll
release.
be admitted.
Okay, thank you. And State would also need to publish.
You may publish, yes.
Looking at this, just so the jury can kind of see what it looks like at this point. GDM, this is section 503.00, is that right?
Yes.
Permission to approach again, Your Honor.
You may.
Sergeant Cordina, I'm going to ask